Someone like you doesn't float in this kind of water, you sink. That's what Conrad Voss whispered to Rowen Hale moments before sliding a photo across the table, her son's face staring back from it. She had no backup, no job, and now someone was watching her every move. But Rowen wasn't built to sink, not anymore. What she did next would turn the tide not just for herself, but for everyone told to stay silent. Before we dive in, let me know, what time are you listening to this and where are you? Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. Chapter 1. Oil Stains. Rowen gripped the wrench tighter, her forearm taut beneath the grimy sleeve of a patched jacket. The cold metal resisted each turn, but unlike the younger techs, she didn't curse at it. Instead, she leaned harder into the work, quiet intent, and stubborn enough to make silence feel chosen rather than imposed. A clang echoed from 2 bays down. "Shit, sorry," muttered Kyle, fresh out of trade school, fumbling beneath the hood of an old Ford. The ignition refused again. Rowen wiped her palms on the legs of her jeans and crossed over. She gave no lecture, simply reached in, nudged the distributor cap, then twisted the key. The engine caught with a coughing roar. Kyle blinked. "What did you?" But she was already walking away. At her bench, Rowen unlatched a lunchbox, the same steel gray as her tools. A sagging sandwich and a bruised apple waited inside, but tucked between napkin and thermos lay a crumpled drawing, 2 stick figures holding hands beside a crooked truck. Across the bottom, thick blue marker declared, "Mom is a hero." Mid-chew, the bread dried on her tongue. Her jaw stopped, eyes hardening, with a flicker no one else would notice. She folded the paper, slid it back, and said nothing. A whistle rose near the garage doors. Afternoon, Ms. Hale called the old dock hand, dragging his bad leg as he limped in. "You in that transmission who's giving up first?" Rowen curved her mouth into half a smile but kept her gaze lowered. He shuffled closer, handing her a coffee-stained flyer with jagged edges. "Big auction at Pier 7, he said. "Mostly confiscated junk. Might be a boat in there you can live on, once this place wears you out." Rowen smirked faintly. How generous. He shrugged. Could be useful. Or not. Hard to say anymore. After he left, she looked once more at the flyer, then slipped it into her jacket pocket unfolded. That night, her empty lunch bag landed on the chipped kitchen counter. The refrigerator hummed but gave no cold. She filled a cracked glass with tap water, let it sit on her tongue, before swallowing, then drifted to the window, fingertips resting on the frame. Streetlights blinked through coastal fog. From somewhere across the harbor, a ship's horn split the stillness, long, low, unrelenting. She stayed there, breath steady, eyes fixed. By morning, the smell of motor oil still clung to her skin. Rowen stood across from Grant Lorvin, who didn't bother to offer her a seat. Beside him sat a woman from HR, new face, stiff smile clipboard, balanced on her knee. The office felt too quiet. "We've reviewed your conduct," Grant said, each word clipped and hollow. "This is your final day." Rowen blinked once. "Because I asked about cut hours and missing supplies." "You were warned," he replied. "Your tone during team meetings, your skepticism, it's disruptive. You've made people uncomfortable." She exhaled slowly. "So asking why we're short on parts when the orders are still full price, that's a fireable offense." Grant looked at the HR rep, not at her. "You're a mechanic, Rowen, not management." Silence pressed against the walls. They handed her a box, one of those thin cardboard ones from the copy room, and left her to pack in solitude. The garage echoed with drills and laughter that didn't include her. No one stepped forward. Kyle glanced up, then back to his wrench. Another tech muttered under his breath and disappeared into the back. She placed her gloves in the box, then her thermos, a keychain from Micah, and finally the photo. It had lived in her locker for years, her Micah and James, his arms slung around her shoulders, grin faint but steady. The edges curled from heat and time. Rowen closed the box and walked out. The sky was gray heavy with the kind of damp that seeped through sleeves. She loaded the box into the truck bed, climbed into the cab, and stared at the windshield. Her hands rested limp in her lap. Then the phone rang. She didn't recognize the number, but answered anyway. "I waited as long as I could," her landlord said. "The lock's changed. I'm sorry, but you're already 2 months behind." He hung up before she could respond. The phone slid from her hand onto the seat screen, glowing faintly beside her thigh. She left it where it was. By the time school let out, she'd shifted only once to wipe condensation from the window glass. Micah climbed into the truck, cheeks flushed from recess. "Are we going home?" he asked. She buckled him in. Sort of. They drove aimlessly until the road curved along the waterfront. The docks seemed quieter than usual. Old cranes stood motionless, birds nesting in their rusted joints. Micah pointed. "What's that sign say?" Rowen followed his finger. A banner hung crookedly on the chain-link fence city auction. Confiscated items, 1 day only. She gave no answer, only turned the wheel. The pier smelled of salt and gasoline. Maybe a dozen people milled around, picking through boxes of electronics and water-damaged furniture. Somewhere a radio played a song she didn't recognize. That's when she saw the boat. Long, narrow, wooden ribs bowed under years of sun and salt. Chipped paint revealed layers red, then green, then raw timber. A faded tag read, Lot 42, $10. It looked abandoned, untouched for years. No one stood near it. She raised her hand. The man collecting payments didn't blink. "That one's yours." He scribbled a receipt on the hood of a nearby truck and handed it over without a glance. She led Micah up the dock. The gangplank groaned beneath their weight. The door stuck at first, then gave with a wet scrape. The cabin reeked of mildew and metal. Dust drifted in the flashlight beam undisturbed for years. Micah moved softly, fingers grazing a rotted beam. "It breathes," he said. "Like our old house." Rowen didn't reply. Her boots creaked as she made her way to a narrow bench built into the wall. She sat carefully. The wood held barely. From the cardboard box, she pulled the photo and set it on a half-empty paint can. The glass in the frame had cracked diagonally, maybe months ago, maybe that day. She couldn't remember. Wind stiffened. Rain tapped across the deck. Micah curled onto a folded canvas pile jacket pulled over him. He didn't ask anything. Rowen folded her hands in her lap. She listened as the rain thickened, drumming harder. The boat didn't sway. It hardly moved. Neither did she. Rowen shoved the canvas pile aside, revealing damp planks beneath. Mold crept along the corners where water had long settled. She pulled her jacket tighter, grabbed a stiff, bristled broom and swept. Dust rose, tangled with salt in the air, then drifted back down as if it refused to leave. Micah huddled near the bulkhead, folding her second jacket into a makeshift pillow. His knees curled beneath him. "Do boats have heat?" he asked without lifting his eyes. "Not this one," she murmured, brushing debris into a cracked bucket. Wind pressed against the hull. Something loose on the upper deck clattered in sharp rhythm, metal on metal. A door, maybe. She made a mental note to check it later, though her shoulders ached and her palms stung raw. Every wall seemed too close, every beam too low. The boat wasn't shelter yet, just the last place left. She tucked Micah under the spare canvas, kissed his forehead, then settled beside the hatch leading down to the hold. The hinges groaned once before quieting. Sleep never came. The air stayed restless. Then the noise began, slow, uneven banging from the stern. Rowen seized the flashlight and crept into the shadows. Her boots echoed along the narrow walkway. At the back, a door rocked on its hinge, tapping the side rail again and again. She pulled it shut, latched it, then turned. One board on the deck stood out, grained smoother, darker. At its edge, a sliver of metal glinted beneath warped plywood. She knelt, pressed the seam. It yielded slightly under her touch. A hidden panel nailed down a sheet of metal beneath. Loose but never meant for easy opening. She eased back, perched on a crate, and watched the spot in silence. The boat groaned under its own weight. Wind screamed through mooring poles and fell away just as quickly. Morning scraped across the sky in low gray. 2 knocks short, deliberate, sounded against the hull. Rowen cracked the door. Ezra Bloom stood on the dock in a grease-stained windbreaker. His hair had thinned, his eyes more guarded, but the way he shifted his stance was unchanged, uncertain if he belonged. "Didn't think you were still in town," he said. "I didn't think you'd still be working docks." He shrugged. "Saw your name on the buyer list." "You really picked this boat up for $10, that's what it said." He moved closer, leaning to glance past her into the dim cabin. "Mind if I check just to make sure it won't fall apart while you're sleeping here?" She moved aside, wordless. Ezra walked the deck, tapping joints and corners with a short rod from his belt. His motions were slow but sure, familiar, once trusted. Micah poked his head from the canvas. "Is he a sailor?" Ezra chuckled. "Not really, kid. I just keep boats from sinking. That's like being a doctor for ships." "Guess it is." Rowan's expression eased if only a fraction. When Ezra finished, he nodded. She's holding together. Just don't stash anything heavy aft. That beam's soft as bread. He climbed back onto the dock, pausing halfway. You're not planning to stay here long, right? She gave no reply. Call if something breaks, he added without offering a number. His boots faded down the planks into the shuffle of dock workers starting their shifts. A gull screeched overhead. Somewhere a crane lowered a container with a groan of steel. Rowan drifted to the stern, wrapped her hands around the railing. Wind surged up from the water, sharp and sudden, tugging at her coat. Her fingers clamped tighter on the cold metal. The sky pressed low, the air thick, but she stayed at the edge toes near the drop. She didn't step back. Behind her, the hatch moaned a soft complaint of something left ajar. Then a metallic click. Rowan spun. The lower panel rattled once. She watched, waited, then moved toward the sound. The wood gave way with a sound like breath held too long. Rowan pried out the last nail, its head rusted, bending under pressure. She set the hammer down and drew back the warped plywood panel. Beneath it lay a thin metal sheet, scratched dull, streaked with what might have once been oil. No screws held it, only friction and time. She wedged her fingers beneath one edge and lifted. The plate slipped free with a sharp clink. Cool air spilled out. A cavity no larger than a kitchen cabinet opened before her tight square lined with old insulation. Wooden boxes sat stacked in pairs. They weren't dusty, no cobwebs, no mold. Unlike the rest of the boat, this place had been sealed. Rowan reached forward. The first crate was heavy, almost solid. No markings, no serial numbers. The lid lifted without resistance. Black foam lined the interior, and rows of electronic components gleamed beneath her flashlight. Microchips, circuit boards, parts too clean to belong here. She peeled back another layer, more of the same. No shipping slips, no instructions, not even a logo. Micah's voice came soft behind her shoulder. That stuff looks expensive. Rowan gave no reply. She opened the next box. Same contents, sleek black casings, anti-static film, not a single fingerprint. At the bottom sat a crate of a different shape, flatter, wrapped in wax paper instead of foam. She dragged it out, lowering onto her heels. The wrapping crackled as she pulled it open. Documents slid into her lap. Some were typed, most printed in a language she didn't recognize, sharp, angular script like teeth in a row. One page bore a red watermark, smeared but distinct, a triangle resting on a stylized wave. Her eyes caught. That mark, she'd seen it before, stamped on a crate James unloaded months before his accident. She remembered vaguely him coming home late, dust on his sleeves, mentioning shipments being rerouted more than usual. He hadn't seemed worried, not exactly, but not at ease either. She'd made dinner and changed the subject. Now her hands gripped whatever that silence had once tried to bury. Micah crouched close, careful not to touch. Why is it here? Shouldn't it be somewhere official? Rowan slid the papers back into their wrapper. Her pulse quickened. Sweat prickled at her neck despite the chill. She studied the stacked crates. Whoever hid them hadn't meant them to be discovered, and whoever owned them hadn't returned. The air in the hold thickened. The flashlight dimmed shadows, softening as the walls seemed to press inward. Are we going to tell somebody? Micah pointed at the open panel. Rowan stayed silent. Instead, she replaced the crates, pressing them back into their exact slots. Each fit snug as if the space had been built around them. The metal cover slid into place without a scrape. She nailed the plywood down with careful, measured strikes. No overblows, no hesitation. By the end, her knuckles throbbed. She slumped against the far wall, boots stretched toward the hatch. Micah sat beside her, arms around his knees, chin resting forward. Is it stolen? He asked. Rowan stared straight ahead. I don't know. He nodded as if that was answer enough. Silence stretched, broken only by wood, groaning under old strain, and water slapping the hull. Overhead, a crane shrieked once, then went still. Rowan lifted the flashlight again for one last sweep. Near the ceiling, just above the insulation, she found a carving scratched into a beam. Letters faint, almost invisible without angled light. CA7 Chalk VL. No instructions, no names, no dates. But someone had left a mark. Not only cargo, not only silence. By the next afternoon, fluorescent lights and linoleum replaced the creak of the hull. The waiting room smelled of disinfectant and burned coffee. A kid screamed somewhere down the hall, ignored by his mother. Rowen kept her shoulders back, hands clenched around a manila folder packed with every document she owned. Birth certificate, expired lease, W-2s with the ink fading. Behind the plexiglass window, a woman with a headset and pale-shadowed eyes waved her forward. Rowen stepped closer. "I'm here for emergency assistance. Rent support, maybe you'll need to fill this first." The woman slid a clipboard beneath the glass without looking up. Rowen printed each line in sharp, blocky letters. Income none. Dependents 1. Employer none. Date of termination recent. She paused at reason for dismissal, then left it blank. 10 minutes later, a door buzzed open. A man in a sweater vest called her name. His smile came too quickly. On his desk sat a photo of a poodle in a Halloween costume. "We'll see what we can do today, Ms. Hale," he said, already clicking his mouse. She handed over the folder. He skimmed, nodded, frowned, then stopped. There's a note here. From your previous employer." Her chest tightened. "Something about workplace disruption? A warning issued a few weeks ago." "That wasn't accurate," she answered slowly. "I asked about missing materials. That's all." He nodded, still reading. "Unfortunately, flagged files limit what we can offer. You don't meet the urgency criteria. You'd need verified eviction or domestic risk. Neither apply." She stared at him. "We're living on a boat." "That isn't on record." She rose. He offered a polite smile, as if it could soften the refusal. "You can try again in 90 days if circumstances change." Rowen stepped outside into daylight that carried no warmth. A gust scattered flyers across the lot. Her truck sat crooked between faded lines. She moved toward it slowly. Someone stood nearby. A man in a gray hoodie, jeans, too clean for dock work. He faced away, arms crossed, feet set wide. Unmoving, deliberate. At 20 feet, he turned his head slightly, looked at her, then at the truck. Then he walked off. Not hurried, not slow, just gone. Rowen scanned the lot. No one else seemed to notice. Her hand hovered near her keys until she was safely inside. The door creaked louder than usual as it shut. Back at the pier, the boat swayed lightly in its slip. The sky dulled to steel-gray seagulls, perched like sentries along the rails. She unlocked the cabin door and stepped through. Something was wrong, she felt it at once. A draft slid through, though no windows were open. Micah's drawing, usually pinned to the wall, lay face down on the floor. She rushed to the storage crate lid, ajar, blankets shoved aside. Clothes, rifled duffel, half unzipped. The photo frame lay shoved under the bench glass, spiderwebbed, a faint footprint stamped along the edge. Her breath caught. Micah wasn't there. Panic clawed her chest until a thump sounded below. She bolted down the steps. He was fine, sprawled on folded canvas, chewing a granola bar, headphones in. He glanced up as she exhaled. "Hey, I thought you'd be longer." She didn't answer, just pulled him close, holding on too long. When Micah settled again, Rowen crept toward the hold. The hidden cache remained untouched. Crates lined as before, the metal sheet flush. But the air felt different. Not broken, not yet. Observed. Her phone buzzed. A number she didn't know lit the screen. No caller ID. A text followed. "Better pretend you never saw anything." No name. No punctuation. No thread. She stared at it, then switched the phone dark. Walked to the door. Slid the bolt. The lock clicked. She tugged the curtain across the porthole, reached for the nearest switch, and let the cabin fall black. Pulling Micah into her arms, she wrapped the blanket around them both and let the dark close in. By the next morning, the dark had traded places with fluorescent glare. The diner reeked of grease and burned coffee grounds, vents long overdue for cleaning. Lights buzzed above, casting the checkerboard floor in sickly gray and yellow patches. Ezra sat at a corner booth, shoulders hunched, both hands wrapped around a chip mug. Rowen slid into the opposite seat without a word. Her coat stayed zipped damp with sea spray. An envelope lay in the middle of the table, like an accusation. Ezra pushed it toward her. "They match." She didn't move. "Match what exactly?" "Serial numbers," he said, lowering his voice. "I traced a few from your photos. They're logged in port records 12 months ago under Voss Freight." Rowen's eyes lifted. The same Voss Freight that claimed an accidental misrouting. He nodded slowly. "Manifest says the cargo arrived. Nothing about it leaving. Inventory gone. No police report, no follow-up. She kept her hands away from the envelope. And you just happened to find that after 10 years of silence, Ezra set his mug down with care. My brother worked the audit desk. Last year, he flagged those same numbers, told me they stank. 3 days later, his phone went dead. Disconnected everything. Gone. Rowan's breath thinned, and the official story state line. Voluntary disappearance. No foul play suspected. His fingers tapped once on the mug, then stopped. Her arms crossed tight. So I'm the stand-in now. The pawn, his gaze stayed level. You're the one living on stolen cargo. I didn't know when I bought it. You do now. Silence pressed between them. A gull scraped its claws on the roof. Rowen finally said, "So what do you want?" "To be careful," he said. "If you're in being. If not, walk away now. The next step doesn't have a return." She shoved the envelope aside. "You should have told me the first night." "I didn't know then," he said. "And I didn't think you'd stay." Rowan rose, hands trembling only slightly. "Neither did I." She left the diner without another word. Cold air clawed her sleeves as she crossed the lot. In the truck, Micah slept, curled against the armrest, mouth open. She started the engine, unsure why. The boat groaned beneath her boots as she returned. The sky hung colorless gulls, silent. She dropped her bag by the doorway and reached for the hammer. The lock on the compartment glared back at her. First swing metal shrieked. Second hinges gave way. A third strike split it clean. She hauled the hatch open. Crates waited below, lined in rows like bodies at rest. Kneeling, Rowan pried the first lid. A matte black case lay cushioned in dense foam, every edge sealed tight. She unlatched it. Rows of circuitry and power converters gleamed cold, untouched. No marks, no instructions, nothing to name them. The next box was the same, and the next. 5 cases in each carried the same uneasy purpose, concealed origin erased. One bore a faint stamp, CA7, Oranges Kurdi VL, barely visible when tilted beneath the bulb. Above, Micah shifted in his sleep. Rowan stayed crouched, tracing edges as if truth might rise under her touch. The cases revealed nothing, no scratches, no initials, no past. One by one, she laid them out across the floor, studying them like puzzles that refused to solve. A bolt slipped from her pocket, clattering across the planks, before rolling into shadow. The sound tugged an old memory, honest work engines, steel. Problems you could solve if you had the right wrench. This wasn't that. She opened another crate. Its weight told her immediately this one was different. By the following afternoon, she was no longer in the hold. The bell above a narrow bookshop door gave a tired chime, almost embarrassed to announce her. Dust swirled in golden slants of light from the storefront window, drifting like restless ghosts between sagging shelves. The air smelled of paper, cedar, and time. Micah darted ahead, fingertips brushing worn spines, until a stack of comic books pulled him down cross-legged. He flipped through the pages with reverenced lips parted in a grin. Rowan stayed near the front, scanning not just the shelves but the windows, the crooked security mirror hanging in the corner. Her pulse eased slightly, no trace of the man from the dock. No watchful eyes. The shopkeeper looked like he'd stepped out of a faded photograph. Tan cardigan, crooked glasses, a voice roughened by disuse. "Looking for anything particular?" "Ship routes," she said, tone kept even. "Nautical charts, freight history." He rubbed his jaw. "Got coastal navigation archives 20 or 30 years behind. If you want accuracy, try the library. If you want ghosts of old cargo, aisle 6. She nodded, moved carefully toward the slanted floorboards of aisle 6, adjusting her balance the way she had on deck. The air cooled still enough for her boots to creak. One shelf bowed beneath rolled maps, their edges brittle with age. Another groaned under the weight of bound maritime cases. She skimmed along the spines until a thick folder caught her eye. Red sticker stamped, "Pending case open." Her fingers hovered, then drew it free. The pages detailed a dispute between shipping companies over falsified manifests. One section marked a logistics stop missing from official records, an inlet barely 2 miles from where her boat had been found. A diagram traced the trade route, curving in a sharp, illogical loop that defied sense or reason. Her breath hitched. "From the front, Mom. This one's got a robot pirate with sunglasses." Micah's voice burst through the hush. She slid the folder back with care. At the counter, the shopkeeper handed her a folded map from a pile behind him. If you're chasing that bend, he said, tapping the edge, this copy's from a freight lawsuit. Not official, but accurate. That turn, no port ever claimed it. She studied his face. You read every case in here. I read what gets left behind. Late afternoon light slanted warm and gold. Micah bounced toward the truck, clutching his comic like treasure. Rowen locked the passenger door behind him, slid into her seat, the map still in her hand. They drove in quiet rhythm road, rolling with the coastline. Micah finally said, "That store smelled like Grandpa's boat jacket." She glanced at him. "You think people remember smells more than they admit," she answered. He leaned back, content. A memory flashed, her father's calloused hand gripping a trawler's wheel, the voice saying, "A boat only gets lost when people stop looking for the shoreline." She hadn't heard it in years. The map rustled against her knee as the truck jostled a rough patch. She held it tighter without lifting her eyes from the road. They reached the town's edge at sundown golden light, washing the windshield. Power lines stretched above like taut strings, humming faintly as they passed. She turned down the dock road. Behind them, a motorcycle slid into view. Sleek, unmarked. It lingered, then ducked behind a billboard as they reached the lot. Rowen parked slowly, didn't cut the engine, waited. Micah yawned, rubbing his eyes. Salt air drifted through the cracked window. She unfolded the map across the wheel. The same loop, the same nameless turn. Her reflection in the rear view hardly shifted, but her eyes searched the curve of road behind them. The bay shimmered under wind, its surface hiding more than it revealed. She pushed open an office door that smelled faintly of burnt coffee and old law books. Outdated journals leaned on a dusty shelf, and a dead machine slouched in the corner. At the desk, a woman barely looked up before waving her toward the inner room. The nameplate read, Jordan Klein-esque, though the man who rose to greet her looked unprepared for client's shirt-rumpled tie hanging loose. Still, he offered a steady handshake and gestured toward a chair. Rowen placed the envelope between them, thick with photocopies and folded maps. "I'm not asking for a lawsuit," she said. "Just tell me if I'm seeing this right." He slid on a pair of glasses, flipping through until his finger froze on the diagram of the shipping loop. His expression remained even until he reached the crate photo with the faded emblem. "Where did you get this?" His voice had lost its casual edge. Rowen leaned forward, tone low. "A boat, auctioned at the dock. I didn't know what it carried until I opened it." He tapped the page again, slower this time. "That logo belongs to Voss Freight." "I do now," she said. Klein studied her longer than necessary, then shut the file quietly. "I'm sorry. I can't take this. You just said I know what I said." His eyes flicked toward the window. "You didn't get this from me. And if you're smart, you'll forget it ever existed." She gathered the envelope, hands trembling too much to fold it. Weak sunlight pressed hard against her chest as she stepped back into the lot. At the dock, a matte black SUV idled near the edge windows, reflecting only sky. No one got out. The engine hummed low and patient. She didn't break stride, parking by the boat and walking Micah up the gangplank with her spine stiff as iron. By dusk, the air turned sharp. Micah coughed into his pillowskin, fever hot. She rummaged the first aid kit half empty. No children's medicine, no thermometer. He whimpered, clutching the corner of her old flannel jacket. The ER was out of reach. Too many questions, too much paperwork. She pulled on her coat, whispered, "Just a little drive," and carried him to the truck. The clinic hid behind a strip mall, its sign flickering. A weary nurse checked Micah's temperature and slipped her a paper bag with off-brand acetaminophen. "We're not supposed to," the nurse murmured. "But he needs it." Rowen muttered thanks. No questions followed. In the parking lot, she sat motionless for a beat before turning the key. Micah breathed easier in the back cooler now. At the marina, the wind had risen. The SUV was gone, but a sharp tang of motor oil hit her as she climbed aboard. The cabin latch dangled loose, drawers half open, one cushion sliced. Nothing taken, just a warning. Her eyes found the far wall black grease letters smeared thick. "This is your warning." She stood still, ears ringing, the words burned into her sight. Every hair on her arms bristled, waiting for another strike. Micah whimpered in his bunk. She crossed quickly, pulled the blanket high. He murmured her name without waking. Rowen's face stayed dry, hands steady. She went back to the door, threaded a heavy chain through the loops, tightened the padlock until the links groaned. Then she pulled out the portable welder, thumbed the trigger. Flame hissed, heat sparking bright as metal fused with metal. No undoing it without a saw. When it cooled, she tested the handle. Solid. Her palm lingered there before she backed away into the dark cabin, the air still sharp with the scent of burnt steel. Ezra was already waiting when Rowen arrived, standing near a rusted winch tower with both hands shoved deep in his coat pockets. The boneyard of ships sprawled behind him, all stripped hulls and broken rails like skeletons scattered under a salt sky. Micah slept in the truck, breath fogging the glass. Rowen didn't answer right away. Wind scraped across the grates beneath her boots, carrying the smell of old oil and seawater left too long in still pools. Ezra pulled a manila envelope from his coat and handed it over. "They're not careful," he said. "Or maybe they don't think they need to be." She opened it, printed emails, grainy screenshots. One stood out, an exchange between Grant Lorvin and someone signed only CV, subject line, container route. Floating transfer. Floating transfer, she muttered, fingers tightening around the page. Ezra nodded. "Your boat was one of several. Mobile containers. Shipments moved between Canada and here by water instead of rail, less oversight." "And mine was left behind," she said. "But not emptied." He pointed to the last page. "Says your vessel was flagged discontinued route cargo, pending removal." Pending. That means someone still planned to come back for it. Rowan's stomach turned. The oil-smeared warnings, the break-in, the anonymous texts, they weren't random. Someone still believed the boat belonged to them. "They know I have it," she whispered. "They're watching." "I passed everything to a federal contact field investigator," out of Eugene, Ezra said. But weeks later, no movement. Nothing public. "Then what are we doing?" The question slipped sharper than she intended. Ezra lowered his voice. "This isn't paperwork for me. My brother worked for Voss. Disappeared last October. The last thing he touched was a flagged shipment." She inhaled through clenched teeth. "I'm not using you," he added. "But if you back off now, they walk free again." Rowen looked past him toward a collapsed railing tangled in net and moss. Water slapped against corroded steel. "I thought I could just live quiet," she murmured. "Be small enough to leave alone." Ezra said nothing. The wind answered instead, rattling a loose fence panel with a metallic whine. Back in the truck, Micah stirred as she climbed in. "Where were you?" he asked, groggy. "Somewhere we shouldn't stay long," she replied, turning the key. At the marina, dusk had fallen early. A cardboard envelope jutted from the hatch, too dry for the day's rain. She snatched it with a glance around. No footsteps on the dock, no hum of an engine. The cabin carried a faint dampness. She peeled the flap open. Her submission to Klein's office lay within, returned untouched. No note, no signature, only the files dismissed without acknowledgement. Micah curled deeper in his sleeping bag. Rowen turned away, envelope still in hand, and knelt by the old dishpan they used for laundry. She placed the stack in it, struck a match from the emergency box. The flame licked upward, catching the corner. She held it by the edge, watching orange crawl across names, dates, threats. One sheet at a time, she fed the pan. The glow never flared, only smoldered steady, asking nothing but patience. Her breath fogged the window above. A foghorn moaned far out on the water, low stretched like a warning or a promise she couldn't name. She kept her gaze on the flame until the last corner curled into ash. Then she reached into the drawer, drew out the folded map, and spread it flat. This time she didn't just trace the coast. She began to mark it. The road stretched like a scar beneath halogen lights, cutting through the dark, with no destination in sight. Rowan's grip tightened on the wheel as Tacoma slipped into the rear view. She didn't look back. Her breath fogged faintly on the window, and the glove compartment rattled each time the tires struck a crack in the asphalt. Micah lay curled in the back seat, knees tucked, one small hand locked around his backpack strap, as if it could anchor him. A bag of crackers sat half open on the passenger floor, forgotten. The dashboard clock blinked 2:03 a.m., then went dark as though even time had grown too tired to move. She hadn't packed much, just a duffel with 2 changes of clothes, Micah's fever medicine, the folded map, and the manila folder she still hadn't brought herself to burn. The heater hissed, pushing weak air that barely touched the chill. Nothing about this night felt safe. A semi thundered past on the left, spraying mist across her windshield. The yellow highway lines blurred, twisting like frayed threads. She blinked hard, then checked the mirror. Empty. Checked again. Still empty. An abandoned rest stop flickered by neon letters, buzzing open, above a vending shelter, fractured red and blue bleeding across cracked pavement. She kept driving. Memory crept in, half warning, half confession. The accident report from Devon's wreck 2 years ago had blamed debris on the road, but the day before, he'd told her something was wrong with the steering. He'd flagged it on a Voss shipment. He never finished that job. Someone else closed the work order. She hadn't wanted to believe. But the hesitation in his voice, the quick, "Never mind," it landed heavy now. The road bent. Her front tire clipped the shoulder with a violent jolt. The truck swerved. She yanked the wheel back, tires shrieking. Headlights from an SUV exploded against her vision as it swerved past. The guardrail rushed up fast. She slammed the brakes. Metal screamed. The truck skidded sideways, shuddering to a stop inches from the barrier. The seatbelt bit deep into her collarbone as her body lurched forward. For half a minute she sat frozen, pulse hammering the pressure in her ears. More than panic, something buried trying to break loose. Then the door flew open. Boots hit the cold shoulder. Cloud cover smothered the stars. The air smelled of rain. She bent over the roof, gasping, knuckles white against the metal. Wind tugged her jacket hem like it meant to drag her away. A small sound stirred behind her. Mom Rowen turned. Micah's face blinked through the gap in the seat's hair-mussed voice soft against the idling engine. "Are we okay?" She swallowed, tried to nod, failed. "I think so. Were you scared?" Her breath left slow, shaky. Sliding back into the seat, she whispered, "Yeah, I was." He studied her, unstartled. "But you stopped," he said. This time her nod came firm. "Yeah, I stopped." Micah leaned forward, chin on the seat. "So, now what?" Her hands settled on the wheel again, cold but steadier. The road stretched dark, endless. She didn't answer right away. Finally, "We're not running." His eyes widened. "We're going back." She met his gaze in the mirror. "We're going where they hoped we wouldn't." He didn't press. Just tugged the blanket higher and lay back. Rowen gripped the shifter. Her fingers trembled, but her motion held purpose. She flicked the signal out of habit more than need, and eased the truck into a deliberate arc. The tires bit into the asphalt like they'd made a choice. She pressed the gas. Harder. Hours later, warm light replaced highway dark. The community center's event hall glowed in amber linen and glass catching the shine. Laughter drifted lazily between marble columns where navy and gold tables stood dressed with sculptures of clasped hands. A jazz trio murmured near the back wall. Rowen kept to the edges, slipped past the buffet, past the smiling faces. She wore a second-hand blazer, too tight in the shoulders, and borrowed heels from the church swap box. Her name wasn't on the guest list, but with a clipboard in hand and a quick stride, no one asked. At the far end, banners framed a podium, Voss Foundation building, Futures Restoring Hope. Smaller print below, in partnership with the Port of Tacoma and Voss Freight Logistics. Her breath thinned as she neared the reception desk. "I need to speak with Mr. Voss," she told the woman, flipping through donation forms. "Just a moment of his time." The woman's smile wavered, polished but strained. "He's with donors right now. I won't take long." Before she could be brushed off, a smooth baritone cut in from behind. "It's quite all right." Rowen turned. Conrad Voss stood a step away, one hand on a chair, the other holding champagne. Younger than the photos, late 40s, tan from lamps, not labor, salt and pepper hair, perfect tuxedo gleaming, but his eyes, pale, steady, unreadable, were colder than she had imagined. "Ms. Hale, isn't it?" His tone carried almost a fondness. "We've heard colorful things." She stayed silent. "Walk with me." They stepped through a side door to a veranda strung with low lights. The glass shut behind them. No one followed. Conrad leaned on the railing, sipping. "Quite a story you've made. First the boat, then the files, then Ezra. Persistent man. Foolish but persistent." "You've been watching me," Rowen said. "Of course." He gestured broadly. "You're not hard to follow. People like you rarely are." Her stomach nodded. "I'm not here to threaten," he went on. "I admire resilience, but people mistake discovery for understanding. That's dangerous. Dangerous to who she asked, to everyone touched by it, even the unwilling. He turned toward her, smile gone. Do you know what happens to small boats in deep water? Too much cargo off charted paths. He stepped closer. They sink, not because they're wrong, because they're not built for what lies beneath. Rowen didn't back away. He studied her, then slipped a folded page from his blazer, laid it on the railing, tapped one step back. People think they have choices, he said quietly. Most of the time, the road was already drawn. She felt the chill burrow deeper than the night wind. Enjoy the rest of the evening, Conrad added, smile returning as he melted back into golden light. Rowen unfolded the paper with slow care. A photo, grainy but unmistakable. Mica jacket backpack crossing near the school. Timestamp yesterday. Her lungs seized, her eyes locked. She folded the photo, slid it into her pocket. Fingers shook. Posture did not. Back through the hall, she passed an ornate mirror. Gilded frame. Glass spotless. Her reflection stared back. Pale skin, tired mouth hair, pulled too tight. Brittle. Sharp-edged. This time she didn't look away. She kept walking. The rusted sign above the dry dock still read, Merit Marine Repair, though the M dangled sideways like a broken jaw. Rowen parked behind a stack of hull plates, engine ticking in the cold. Her fingers clung to the wheel longer than necessary. She considered backing out driving until the tank ran dry, but didn't. The air carried salt dust and scorched metal. Fluorescent lights buzzed, throwing pale flicker across the half-lit concrete. Ezra's tools lay scattered on a steel table, as if he'd walked away mid-task and never returned. A voice filtered in from deeper within his, low and muffled. She followed it past crates and winches until the break room door came into view, slightly ajar. Ezra stood with his back-turned, phone to his ear. No, not yet, he said. She's close. I think she's ready to move. Pause, I'll let you know. Just don't push anything until I say. He hung up. Her pulse surged, heartbeat too fast and shallow. A vibration lit his screen. She glimpsed the message she knows. The floor might as well have tilted beneath her. She nudged the door wider. The creak made Ezra whirl around. His face shifted, shock, then dread. Rowen. What the hell was that? He shoved the phone into his pocket. It's not what it sounded like. She stepped forward, voice steadier than expected. Really, because it sounded a whole lot like you're playing both sides. It's not that simple. No, Ezra, it really is. He raised his hands. I've been trying to keep you out of it. Her eyes narrowed. By updating someone that I know, I was buying time. Time for who he hesitated. I thought your brother died because of this, she said. Is that true, or another angle to keep me close? His shoulders sank. He's gone. That part's true, but the part about helping me wasn't. I have helped you, he snapped. If I hadn't given you the logs, you fed me just enough to keep me in place. Like a goddamn tether. Ezra's mouth opened, then closed. He looked away, jaw clenched. It's not just you. This whole thing, it's layers deep. People above me, above Grant. I thought I could play along until I found a way to. Until what? Until they cleaned me up and left you out of it. I didn't want you hurt. Too late. She turned and walked out. The slap of her boots echoed off steel walls like punctuation marks. No one followed. By the time she reached the truck, her fingers shook too badly to work the keys. She leaned against the hood, letting the cold bite her palms until her breathing slowed. No tears, just something hollow carving space behind her ribs. Driving back felt like navigating fog, each turn muscle memory, each light a question she no longer answered. The boat came into view at the dock, shadowed by the last glow of dusk. Rowen pulled up and knew instantly something was wrong. The mooring line had been retied too loose, too high. Wrong hands had touched it. She ran down the gangplank, heart pounding, scanning the vessel until she saw it. A gash 3 feet long scarred the starboard side, thin, clean, unforgiving. Not vandalism, not an accident, a mark, a warning. She dropped to her knees, pressing her hand to the cut. Fingers traced its depth, its intention. Surgical, deliberate. Whoever carved it knew how to send a message without words. Micah's coat still lay on the bunk. His backpack waited. A half-full cup of water sat beside the cot. Yet the air had changed, charged as if someone had just left. Rowan sank down beside the wound back to the cold steel wall. Her palm hovered, then settled against the scar. It felt like skin cut without blood, a violation designed to be remembered. Wind whipped across the water. Far out in the sound, a foghorn moaned low and long, the vibration traveling straight through her bones. She pulled the flashlight from her coat pocket and aimed it at the base of the hull. Another mark, smaller, fainter, letters scratched into the paint, R.E. Not her initials, not his. But someone had been here. Someone was still watching. Behind her, the boat creaked, a subtle settling like lungs drawing a long breath. She didn't move. This was past questions now, and somewhere someone was already counting how many nights she had left. The storm hadn't eased by nightfall. Sheets of rain hammered the windshield as Rowan steered through the narrow streets behind the harbor. Wipers screeched with every pass, barely keeping pace. Micah curled in the passenger seat, eyes half-closed, jacket clutched like a blanket. His silence made the storm outside feel louder. At the edge of the residential quarter, Rowan pulled up to a faded blue house with sagging gutters. A crooked mailbox leaned by the path, paint peeling in strips. The porch light flickered, then steadied. Mrs. Flint answered after 2 knocks, peering through the screen like she'd been waiting. "You're late," she said, voice kind, despite the words. "Rain slowed us down," Rowan muttered, stepping over the threshold. Warmth hit like a wave. A kettle whistled in the kitchen, a fire burned low in the hearth. The air carried lavender and dust, peaceful, lived in the kind of quiet only a house that had endured decades could hold. Shelves bowed with brittle-spined books, some stacked sideways, others wedged between porcelain figurines and framed photos. Micah slipped off wet shoes and crouched in front of the hearth, hands outstretched. Mrs. Flint handed him a towel without looking and went back to the kitchen. Rowan followed, setting her bag by the door. "Thank you for letting us stay. You should have come sooner," Mrs. Flint said, pouring tea into chipped cups. "But I know that stubborn look. You got it from your mother." Rowan wrapped cold hands around the ceramic. "You knew her better than I did." Mrs. Flint's mouth twitched. She never let a man or a boss tell her what she was worth, even when it cost her. Rowan stared into the tea. She still lost. She lost the fight, the woman agreed, but not the meaning. Silence stretched, broken only by the ticking wall clock and wind rattling the window. "She once told me," Mrs. Flint said, tapping her cup, "that blood alone doesn't make a family. It's who stays when everything else breaks." The words landed heavy. Rowan thought of her father, silent, unreachable. Her husband gone, half-truth buried in his throat. Her son still looking for safety in her eyes. All of it held together by choices she made in the dark. None of it by blood. "She fought," Rowan whispered. "And I keep hiding. No, honey, you're surviving." That's what she wanted. But at some point, Mrs. Flint leaned closer. "You stop surviving and start showing them who raised you." Rowan didn't answer. She rose, kissed the woman's cheek, and whispered thanks. Back at the boat, Rowan moved with a steadiness she hadn't felt in days. Micah slept soundly in the truck. She lifted him carefully, carried him inside, and tucked an extra blanket over his feet in the corner bunk. The hold still gaped open. Crates lay untouched, yet the air felt charged, humming with presence. From her coat, she pulled the old phone she hadn't touched in months, a burner once kept in the glove box for emergencies. It powered on slowly. The cracked screen flickered, then held. She launched a live stream. No words. Just the camera sweeping across the hold, labels manifest smuggled devices, stamped logos, handwritten notes, the route map with its red-circled ports. Evidence plain. The lens lingered on the code carved into the wall beam, then on Ezra's folder. Comments poured in, faceless and relentless. Some baffled, some demanding names, some only watching. Rowan kept silent. Her face stayed still. Her hands didn't waver. When the feed reached the crate with the broken lock and oilcloth-wrapped contents, she hesitated. Then she tilted the phone lower, revealing the hidden cavity beneath a space designed to conceal, not to carry. A sharp crack split the air above deck. Footsteps followed. Rowan didn't flinch. The phone stayed live a heartbeat longer before she cut the stream, folded it shut, and slid it into her back pocket. Another creak on the steps. Closer. She turned toward the sound and waited. By the following morning, she was sitting under fluorescent glare. The courthouse wasn't grand, just a temporary hearing room tucked behind a city building walls, faintly scented with cleaning solution and old paper. But the lights were brutal, leaving no shadows to hide in. Rowen sat 2 rows from the front, palms pressed flat to her thighs. The seat beside her stayed empty. Micah was with Mrs. Flint. Ezra stood across the aisle, giving a single nod when their eyes met. No words exchanged, none needed. The room filled slowly. Journalists staked out corners, badges, swinging cameras tucked under arms. A federal seal hung above the bench, flanked by 2 flags. The air demanded silence unless summoned. Rowen gripped her copy of the evidence list paper, worn soft at the edges. Each line carried a memory, a night of breath she almost didn't take. The side door opened. Conrad Voss entered as if the ground still belonged to him. Tailored navy suit, tie slightly off-center, haste, not panic. His lawyer leaned in, whispering, but Conrad didn't answer, didn't blink toward Rowen. His gaze stayed fixed ahead until the projector flared. Image after image filled the screen. The hidden hold, the crates, serial numbers, route logs. Footage from Rowen's phone, time-stamped, deliberate, daring anyone to miss it. Ezra's documents followed emails, transfer notes, the shipment file from the night her husband died. The panel didn't stir, neither did she. But Conrad did, barely. A twitch at the mouth, a flicker in the jaw, and there on the screen, magnified, CA7, Shock, VL. The same label she'd once traced in silence. Now 12 strangers traced it too. Ezra rose when called. His first words trembled, then steadied. He spoke of missing inventory, buried complaints, unanswered federal calls. He held nothing back, not even fear. Conrad's lawyer objected twice, relevance, then character. Both overruled. Rowen's turn came. They asked only confirmation. Was this the vessel you purchased at auction? Yes. Did you alter or remove any contents before discovery? No. I opened what was already there. And once you realized what it was, I showed the truth. That's all. The prosecutor closed his file. That's all we needed. She didn't look at Conrad as the decision came. The panel ruled charges would be filed, Conrad indicted and held for hearing. The bailiff advanced. 2 officers joined. Conrad didn't move, but the armor cracked. Not rage, not power, emptiness. A man who'd stopped pretending. As they walked him out, his eyes brushed past hers. Not glare, not smirk. A glance measuring weight he no longer carried. Chairs scraped, voices rose. Ezra leaned toward her row, ready to speak. Maybe you did it, maybe it's over. Rowen lifted one hand. Not yet. The room emptied. She stayed staring at the faded tiles, red chipped at corners, polished to gleam under the lights. Sunlight cut through the high window, striking her knees warm through denim. For the first time in months, no one watched. No orders, no whispers, just her breath steady, and the light. She let it stay a moment, then stood. Her shadow stretched long and clean behind her. Police tape clung, weakly in the morning breeze, fluttering against the side of the old boat, like a warning already fraying. Rowen stepped over without pause, one hand clutching the strap of a canvas bag, the other brushing the pocket where her folded summons rested, no longer needed. The boat felt different now, emptier, though most of it remained. The evidence team had taken the crates, the false walls, the rusted hinges. What stayed behind was bare echoes of hollow floors, outlines, and dust. It smelled of oil and wood, but not danger. She didn't rush. On the dock, Micah kicked pebbles into the water, pretending not to watch through the gaps. Rowen bent for the few things still hers, a wrench under the sink, a cracked photo frame, without glass, the folded jacket she'd once used as a pillow. Each piece carried the weight of before she knew, before she fought. In the corner near the engine box sat a small metal cabinet. She'd always assumed it belonged to a previous owner, or maybe the Coast Guard. The lock had long been broken, easy to twist open. Yellowed papers leaned inside, handwritten notes, some smeared with grease, others crisp and carefully folded. Rowen lifted one and knew the handwriting instantly. Blocky, deliberate, written by someone aware they might never get another chance. Her husband's name wasn't on the page. It didn't need to be. If something happens, don't blame yourself. You kept us going longer than I ever thought we could. She read it once, again, a third time. No dates, no signature. Just that single stubborn sentence that felt like it had waited in the dark for her to be ready. A chair creaked, as she lowered herself to the floor, knees drawn up. The air in the cabin pressed against her skin, not cold, just full. She didn't cry. Not really. But her breath hitched in her throat like it had something sharp to get around. She pressed the note to her chest and leaned her head against the wall, eyes closed. Through the cracked window above, she could hear Micah humming soft off-key, the same lullaby her husband used to sing when the generator failed, and they had nothing but flashlights and whispers, a song about rivers or stars or both. She never remembered the words, just the rhythm. It moved through her like a tide. She didn't get up right away. Let the silence stretch long. Let the memories rise and settle. Then slowly she refolded the paper edges, now worn under her fingers, placed it back where she found it, closed the cabinet gently. Her palm rested on the cool metal a moment longer than necessary. Then, without meaning to, she raised her knuckles and tapped twice, quiet, deliberate, a signal to no one, or maybe just to the past. The boat didn't answer. It didn't need to. She stood, bones aching in places she hadn't noticed for weeks, and gave the space one final glance. Not to mourn, not even to say goodbye, just to acknowledge it like you do when you leave somewhere that changed you. On the way out, she passed by the galley, paused, then turned the faucet. It coughed, spat out a trickle of brown water. Still not fixed, still honest. Micah ran to her, wrapping his arms around her leg, with the quiet urgency of a child who sensed something had shifted. She tousled his hair. "Ready. Can we get pancakes?" Rowen nodded. "Yeah, pancakes sound good." As they walked back up the dock, the boat swayed gently behind them, no longer threatening, no longer hiding. Just floating. Fluorescent panels buzzed faintly overhead, casting a sterile glow across the packed federal courtroom. It wasn't warm light. It didn't try to comfort. But it was clean, unflinching, like the kind found in hospital waiting rooms or basement hallways with nothing to hide. Rowen sat near the back, shoulders drawn but spine straight. Her hands clutched a worn folder, corners bent, contents slightly damp from the mist in the air. She hadn't opened it since stepping through security. Didn't need to. Every word, every number was memorized. In front of her, rows of spectators leaned forward, some from the press, some just hungry for a fall from grace. Murmurs ticked through the air as Conrad Voss entered with a lawyer 2 steps behind and a smirk that didn't quite reach his eyes. Cameras flashed beyond the courtroom doors. He adjusted his tie like it mattered. Rowen didn't flinch. Micah sat beside her, his legs swinging slowly, eyes focused on a crumpled sheet of paper balanced on his lap. He drew in silence, tongue poking slightly between his teeth, completely unaffected by the weight in the room. A boat took shape in graphite lines. Big hull, tiny flag. The prosecutor opened with clarity. No theatrics, no flourish, just hard-stacked facts. Documents, shipment logs, route deviations. Then came the digital trail, timestamps, encrypted chains, financials routed through shell companies. Next, the footage. Rowen's footage. The footage played without sound. Rowen's hand steady on the flashlight, the camera tracing labels, rush shadows. The hush that once lived in that boat seemed to echo through the courtroom, the truth audible in its own way. Conrad's expression barely shifted, save for the tightening of his jaw. Then Grant Lorvin entered, wrists, cuffed suit, wrinkled eyes darting like a cornered animal. He avoided Rowen's gaze as he took the stand, voice uneasy. He claimed he wanted to cooperate, claimed he'd been threatened, claimed he kept records, names, transfers, cash drops, all at Conrad's direction. He faltered when pressed on why he had stayed silent. "I didn't think anyone would listen," he muttered. Rowen breathed through her nose, gaze fixed ahead. The defense tried to recast the shipments as routine logistical irregularities, but the photographs told otherwise. Rare electronics sealed in crates, unregistered inventory paper trails that shouted louder than words. When the judge turned to Conrad asking if he wished to speak, he rose slowly. He offered no apology, no denial. Just stood with jaw-clenched silence, cutting sharper than any plea. The sentence came swiftly: years in federal prison, full forfeiture of assets pending civil liability. No appeal permitted. A gasp broke from the gallery. Reporters scattered for the exits, flashbulbs strobing like distant fireworks. Rowen stayed seated. Micah tugged at her sleeve, showing the paper in his lap. The boat he'd drawn now floated beneath curling wave stars overhead. At the top block, letters read, "Ours." Her mouth softened into a faint smile. The gavel struck once twice. The sound cracked across marble, chased by the shuffle of chairs and murmurs of people already leaving it behind. Rowen did not move. Across the aisle, a court officer gathered forgotten files. A cleaner wheeled in a cart. The room dimmed to ordinary. Micah leaned against her shoulder. Traffic pressed forward beyond the wall's horns echoing off glass towers. But in here, the world held still a moment longer. She let it. Because for the first time in a long while, she could. The sign out front wasn't big hand-painted, smoothed by sandpaper and time. Letters curved gently, softening the name Rowen's Garage, training for single parents. The first real day wasn't marked with a ribbon or speeches, just a Saturday afternoon humming with possibility. The garage air smelled of oil layered with something new, fresh paint, scrubbed concrete beginnings. Sunlight caught the polished edges of refurbished tools hanging on wall pegs like relics reclaimed. Yellow tape marked out practice zones, one for tire changes, another for diagnostics, a corner with a battered coffee pot and flimsy cups that bent under grip. Rowen stood near the back arms, folded lightly, sleeves rolled to the elbow. The same patched jacket from the shop clung to her shoulders, stained by the cuff, still refusing to lift no matter how often she tried. Across the room, a young mother fought a tire iron brow furrowed until one of the dads stepped in. Laughter burst when the bolt gave way with a metallic pop. Someone cheered. A wrench clattered. Micah darted between them, carrying a plastic toolbox half his size, raising it like a trophy every time someone needed a screwdriver. He'd labeled it himself with crooked sticker letters, "Micah's Fix All." Ezra appeared in the doorway, a cardboard box balanced against one hip. Grease smudged his cheek, a leftover mark from wherever he'd been. He didn't announce himself, just crossed the threshold, set the box down near the spare parts shelf, and nodded once in Rowen's direction. She met his eyes, gave a nod back. That was enough. By late afternoon, the shadows stretched longer across the floor. Someone opened the garage doors to let the breeze in, carrying faint music from a nearby market. The sky shifted into that golden softness only autumn offered, cool enough for breath, warm enough to stay a little longer. Rowen moved through the space, checking connections, tightening bolts that didn't need it. Not because things were falling apart, because it felt right to keep touching what she'd built. Above her, the first of the string lights flickered on. Round bulbs, yellow-toned, dangling from the exposed rafters like tiny moons. One by one, they lit up across the ceiling, wrapping beams winding around old pipework. Light scattered across the tools, the workbenches, the hands brushing against engine parts. She stepped outside for a moment, leaned against the doorframe. From there, the garage looked like a lantern lit from within. Laughter spilled out. A socket wrench clanked against concrete. Someone offered someone else a sandwich from a wrinkled brown bag. It wasn't perfect. The roof still leaked on the left. The sink hissed when it ran too long. But it breathed now. It lived. Micah ran over, tugging at her sleeve. "Mom, come look," he said, bouncing on his heels. She let herself be pulled. He led her to the far wall where a new picture frame had been hung, just above the tool chest. It held a photograph, faded at the corners, edges softened by time. The old one, her husband, baby Micah on his lap. But next to it, tucked into the same frame, was a newer print, a candid one. Micah holding up a wrench, Rowen bent beside him, laughing at something no one remembered. Micah pointed. "It's both now, not just old." Rowen pressed her hand to his shoulder. Warm cotton. Small bones beneath. The light from above haloed his hair and spilled across the frame glass. She didn't speak. Behind them, someone turned the radio louder. Someone asked where the socket set had gone. The sound of a ratchet echoed like a heartbeat. Life, ordinary and unannounced, continued. Rowen exhaled through her nose, let the moment sink into her like oil into cloth. She didn't have answers for everything. Still didn't know how to file taxes as a business, or whether she'd break even this month. But the door stayed open. The light stayed on. And for now, that was enough. Sometimes the strongest people are the ones who stand up after everything falls apart. Rowen's story reminds us that healing doesn't always roar. It begins in the quiet moments, the small repairs, and the stubborn decision to keep going. When truth has no place to hide, even a broken boat can become a beacon. If you connected with this story, don't forget to subscribe and join us next time for more tales of resilience, truth, and the power of choosing light.